For 10 years, Lucian battled cancer, and I exhausted all my family's wealth to support his treatment. Just as he was on the verge of recovery, I discovered he had hired a lawyer to draft a will. Standing at the door, I listened as Lucian word by word dictated the contents of his will. Upon my passing, my biological children and their mother, Serena, shall inherit all the property under my name. His childhood sweetheart Serena stood to the side, holding a little boy, her face wet with tears. Clutching the discharge papers, I gritted my teeth and watched the family of 3 in the hospital room. My heart turned to ashes. System, if I give up on the mission, what punishment will I face? I braced myself for obliteration as I asked the system. The system's lethargic voice responded. I forgot to tell you, the one who failed the mission and got eliminated was Lucian. I walked into the hospital room with the discharge papers in hand. Serena immediately pulled away from Lucian's embrace. She stood there awkwardly, holding on to the young man beside her. Seeing her wipe away tears, I tried my best to suppress the bitterness in my heart and spoke with a forced smile. Why is Serena crying? I turned my head to look at Lucian on the hospital bed. Lucian, what did you do that you shouldn't have to provoke Serena? Lucian's gaze was somewhat evasive, with an unmistakable guilt written all over his face. Instead of answering my question, he frowned and asked, How did you get in here? His tone was sharp and impatient. Before I could speak, that young man pointed at me and shouted. Who are you? How did you get into my father's hospital room? Serena's face instantly paled as she glanced sideways at Lucian. A flicker of panic flashed through Lucian's eyes. He cleared his throat awkwardly, trying to explain. Zara, don't misunderstand, the child just spoke nonsense. My hands were buried in my pockets, fists clenched so tightly my nails dug into my palms. This physical pain was nothing compared to the ache in my heart. Only today did I realize that I am nothing but a complete wretch. Lucian and I have been married for 15 years, yet we never had children of our own. Because of this, I've always felt deeply indebted to him. He constantly comforted me, saying, Zara, our love for each other is enough. Children are just accessories to love. All these years, I thought I was living in his love. Little did I know, he already had a child of his own. That child looks to be over 10 years old. No wonder he doesn't care. With a forced smile, I said, It's all right. This child has never known who their father was since they were little, it really is pitiable. Serena glared at me while hugging the boy. Lucian, the discharge papers are ready. We can go home tomorrow. I looked at him, feigning nonchalance. Thank you for your hard work, Zara. Lucian looked at me tenderly. I turned and walked out of the hospital room without acknowledging Serena or her child. With the door slightly ajar, I stood like a thief at the entrance, eavesdropping on the commotion inside. Serena, both you and I have suffered too much over these past 15 years. If it hadn't been for Zara watching so closely back then, I wouldn't have let you and our child follow me without any status. Serena nestled into Lucian's arms again. Lucian, I don't care about any inheritance. I just want to grow old with you and be together forever. But Zara has given too much for me over the years. I can't fail her, so I have no choice but to let you suffer. The boy stood to the side, tightly holding Lucian's hand, saying the same thing. Dad, I just want the 3 of us to stay together as a family. Through the crack in the door, I watched them, the trio, crying in each other's arms and suddenly felt unworthy. For 15 years, I had always put Lucian first in everything. Even when he was diagnosed with cancer with only a 30% survival rate, I still stayed by his side. But in the end, I became the villain who ruined his relationship with his childhood sweetheart. I laughed at myself mockingly and wearily summoned the system. I still can't make Lucian fall in love with me, I said dejectedly. If I give up on this mission, when will I be erased? After a few seconds, the system's lazy voice echoed in my mind. You won't be erased. If the mission failed, it must be the target's fault. So the one being erased is Lucian. The system's voice carried a drowsy electronic tone, sounding slightly distorted. For a moment, I froze, processing this information. So, if I give up on the plan now, how long before he gets erased? I closed my eyes, my voice tinged with bitterness. There are 5 days left until your anniversary. It'll be over soon. The next afternoon, Lucian was discharged from the hospital. I made an excuse not to pick him up and spent the whole day cleaning the house. I'd spent most of these years in the hospital, so the house had barely been lived in. Now that I was going to stay here long term, it naturally needed a good cleaning. Lucian didn't come home all evening. I sat at the dining table, facing the cold dishes, scrolling through my phone. Suddenly his call came through. The background noise on the other end was chaotic, with music playing. It sounded like some kind of party. I called out a few times, but there was no response from the other side. Just as I was about to hang up, a sweet, coquettish female voice suddenly appeared. Lucian, instead of going home after being discharged, you're throwing this birthday party for me. Won't Sister Zara be angry? It was Serena. Then came the voice of a teenage boy whose voice was breaking. Mom, Dad doesn't need to keep playing along with that woman. For so many years, the 3 of us haven't been able to live together as a family, it's all because of that bitch. I hate her. Lucian sighed and said gently, Leo, you can't talk about Aunt Zara like that. She's family to your dad, and she'll be family to you too in the future. I've taught you before, be polite. You can't say such rude things. Then, he comforted Serena. Don't worry, I only told her I had some company matters to deal with. She doesn't know. Serena's voice rose at this moment, sounding overwhelmingly sweet. Lucian, you've worked hard. I just knew you loved me the most. Of course, who else would I love if not you? Lucian's rich voice made the words sound incredibly sensual. But to my ears, it was the ultimate mockery. The call ended right at that moment. As if those heart-wrenching words from earlier were just my hallucination. I sat alone, numb, at the dining table. A cold layer of oil had congealed over the dishes on the table. Mechanically, I forced bite after bite into my mouth. The back of my tongue was coated with cold grease. The food piled up in my throat, choking me until tears and mucus streamed down. With a dry heave, I rushed to the bathroom and vomited everything out. Even though I had already resolved to give up on pursuing Lucian, my heart still ached at this phone call. Nearly 20 years of emotions cannot be erased overnight. A faint hope for him still lingered in me. Now, that unrealistic expectation is completely gone. I lay on the sofa, drifting in and out of sleep. The room was pitch black, with only the moonlight streaming in through the window. A body reeking of alcohol enveloped me. Zara, why are you sleeping so early today? Lucian's gentle voice sounded against the nape of my neck as he affectionately stroked my cheek. Where did you go, today? I couldn't hold back and asked. Lucian hesitated for a moment before evasively replying, company meeting, I remember telling you. Stop being paranoid all day, it's not good for your health, he said with a hint of impatience. I tried my best to suppress the bitterness in my heart. Lucian, would you lie to me? He was clearly taken aback. Zara, you're the most important person to me, why would I lie? Who is the father of Serena's child? He paused for a moment, then suddenly sat up, turning his back to me, visibly angry. When she returned to the country, I already told you that the child's father had passed away. So many years have passed, and you're still stuck on this issue. Don't you trust me? In the darkness, with vision obscured, all other senses were heightened. I could clearly sense Lucian's guilt and panic. Because, without realizing it, he had raised his voice. Lucian, cursing yourself like this, aren't you afraid it might actually come true someday? I couldn't be bothered to argue with him anymore. Suppressing the lump in my throat, I spoke and then got up to head toward the bedroom. Lucian abruptly stood up, trying to grab me, but I shook him off. Zara, I explained to you over a decade ago, Leo's father died in an accident. You've never doubted me all these years, what's gotten into you now? I stopped in my tracks and turned back to look at him. From the moment I first met Lucian, I was captivated by his looks. Back then, he was the golden boy, a wealthy young master who exuded an air of authority since childhood. And I was just a poor student scraping by on scholarships. Most of the students in the school were either wealthy or privileged, and in their eyes, I was an outsider. They bullied me without restraint. They glued my chair, put bugs in my desk, and even threw my backpack into the toilet. Lucian was the only exception. He walked into the bathroom with a dark expression, fished out my backpack, handed it to me, and helped me clean up a bit. Later he said I was under his protection. Back then, he was the only god in my heart. After graduating from university, Lucian gave up everything to start a business for Serena's sake. It was also around that time, for money, I bound to the system and made it my mission to win him over. He and Serena were madly in love, while I could only be a pathetic lapdog by his side. Later, Serena embezzled funds from Lucian's company to keep her family's business afloat. After the bankruptcy, Serena fled abroad directly. I quit my job to help Lucian make a comeback. Nearly 2 decades have passed since then. We are no longer young and have entered middle age. After 10 years of illness, Lucian now has strands of silver hair at his temples, yet his air of exceptional brilliance remains undiminished. His facial features became more resolute, and his eyes grew deeper. But in those eyes, perhaps I was never there. So what if Leo's father really is me? Lucian held on to me, his gaze cold, looking at me with disdain. I haven't had any children all these years, what's wrong with keeping a son for myself? The words from his mouth sent chills down my spine. Before we got married, the premarital checkup had already revealed that I might have difficulty conceiving. Even so, Lucian married me without hesitation. When he was diagnosed with cancer, I was there for him every step of the way. I managed his company and accompanied him through his treatments. The child came and went without my even knowing. Back then, his face was filled with heartache and remorse as he held me, silently shedding tears. Zara, everything I have belongs to you, and I will never let you down in this lifetime. At that time, I thought my sincerity had finally been seen. But now, he mocks me with a scornful tone to hurt me. I trembled with anger, tears rolling down from the corners of my eyes in large drops, falling onto his hands. As if burned, he suddenly pulled me into his arms, whispering soothing words. I'm sorry, Zara, I shouldn't have brought this up. I mustered all my strength to break free from his embrace and slapped him across the face. You disgust me. My stomach twisted in pain, wave after wave, the ache spreading through my heart. For 20 years, I asked the system countless times if Lucian had fallen in love with me. The answer was always no. Only now did I realize the truth. Lucian had always loved Serena. I'm just his family. That night, Lucian didn't enter the bedroom and sat at the doorway the entire night. Until dawn broke, he received a phone call and left quickly. I didn't pay attention to where he went. But someone always informs me. Serena specifically sent me a message. Lucian is currently at the hospital accompanying Leo to see a doctor. Zara, you also know Leo is Lucian's child, I advise you to divorce him as soon as possible. In the photo, Lucian held the teenager's hand with a worried expression. Every strand of hair carried the scent of a benevolent father. I didn't reply, just calmly turned off my phone and buried my head under the blanket. A languid electronic voice echoed in my mind again. Host, there are 3 days left before the target of your strategy is eliminated. You may choose the method of elimination. I stared blankly at the ceiling, then let him die in an accident. Lucian seemed to be avoiding me, he hadn't come back for 2 days in a row. But during these 2 days, news about him never stopped. Serena took great pleasure in updating her social media feed, deliberately not blocking me. At first I would still read a few, but later I became numb to them and simply blocked her. I sorted out Lucian's belongings and neatly arranged them in the study. Right after, I went out to find a lawyer, intending to reclaim the money he had spent on Serena over the years. It wasn't until the evening of the very last day that I finally received a message from him. Where are you? I'll pick you up. I pressed my lips together and outright ignored the message. By the time I got home, it was completely dark outside. As soon as I opened the front door, I saw a mess on the floor. Men's and women's clothes were scattered everywhere. Empty wine bottles were scattered across the living room. Once again, I stood at the doorway like a thief, listening to the commotion inside. "Lucian, I'm wearing Zara's pajamas, does that make you happy?" Serena asked. "Serena, I love you so much," Lucian responded. "Won't Zara find out about us like this? I feel so guilty about her." "Don't worry, baby. She's nowhere around now, she won't come back. Focus, baby." I felt so disgusted by those words that I immediately rushed to the toilet and vomited. Facing the scene of my husband's infidelity for the first time, I didn't even feel heartbroken. My heart had already died long ago. All that remained was disgust. The system appeared again at this moment. Host, detecting the target of your strategy's current emotions, they show remorse toward you. I snorted coldly. It's just a guilty conscience, when has he ever truly cared about me? With that, I turned and went to the guest room. I don't know how long they carried on, but suddenly the door to the master bedroom swung open. Lucian urged Serena to leave quickly, but she clung to him, insisting he see her out. The house finally settled into silence. Disgusted, I opened my bedroom door. The clothes in the living room had already been cleaned up. My pajamas lay in the laundry basket. Frowning, I tossed them into the trash. The door suddenly swung open, and Lucian stood at the threshold, looking at me with surprise. "Zara? When did you get back?" I replied solemnly, "Just now." Lucian stepped forward with an apologetic expression, reaching to pull me into an embrace. I noticed the hickey on his neck and took a few steps back. "If you have something to say it here." "Zara, I'm sorry for what I said that day." Suddenly, I remembered our wedding day. A few wealthy young men surrounded him, mocking me for being infertile. "Lucian, are you really going to marry this barren hen? Zara's just a gold digger currying favor, you could find anyone you want. In school, she always looked shabby. It's just as well she can't lay eggs, saves your family's genes from being tainted." Lucian had been standing silently among them the whole time, never refuting anything. As if tacitly agreeing to all those insults hurled at me. But now, his face was full of remorse, his eyes cautious and pleading for forgiveness. I wonder if he even remembers staying silent back then. I let out a light laugh, "It's fine. I hit you too. We're even now." I went to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. "That pajama in the laundry basket." Lucian's figure visibly stiffened. "I remember it was the first gift you gave me. After all these years, the clothes were getting worn out, so I threw them away. You don't mind, do you?" I smiled at him, my eyes filled with relief. Lucian froze for a moment, then nodded. Perhaps sensing something unusual about me, he followed me to the guest room. Trapped in his embrace, I couldn't break free no matter how hard I tried. "Zara, these past couple of days. I felt too ashamed to face you, so." I cut him off. "Lucian, do you love me?" He paused, forcing a smile. "Why ask that?" "Seems like you don't love me," I said calmly. "It's not that, Zara. After all these years of marriage, love has long been worn away." His tone turned instantly flustered as he rushed to explain, "You're the most important person in my life, my closest, dearest one." I didn't respond, only saying, "Go to sleep." In the middle of the night, he was half asleep and kept calling my name in his dreams. After waking up from a nightmare, he would hold me and ask if I would leave him. I couldn't sleep all night. The next day, Lucian woke up early and, for the first time ever, made breakfast for me. I glanced casually and said I wasn't hungry, planning to go out. "Zara," he suddenly called out to me, hesitating before finally asking, "Why are all my things packed up?" "Oh," I replied casually, "those things have been used for years. I'm planning to replace them for you." With those words, I walked out the door. Today was Lucian's last day in this world. I sat in the office the whole time, waiting for news of his death. By now, the the dull ache that once tore at my heart was completely gone. I had long let go, feeling only the joy of impending liberation. At 2:40 p.m., Lucian was involved in a serious car accident on his way to visit his illegitimate child at the hospital. Despite emergency treatment, he couldn't be saved. Lucian was finally dead. When the message arrived, I was zoning out in my office. The slightly distorted voice of the system rang out. "Congratulations, host. The target of your strategy has been successfully eliminated. 50 million funds have been transferred to your account. Wishing you a pleasant life." Before I could even process the words, the system vanished from my mind. No matter how I called out, it refused to reappear. Only then did I realize, this 20-year-long strategic mission had finally come to an end. I didn't complete the mission. There were no winners these 20 years. Lucian's funeral was very simple. Dressed in black, I stood solemnly in the mourning hall, exchanging formal condolences with the arriving friends and relatives. Serena barged in with that boy named Leo right at that moment. "Zara, why did you take the inheritance Lucian left for me and my child?" Serena, holding the will in her hand, stood in the mourning hall, shouting in a fit of rage. "The guests are all watching us. Some are astonished, some are gossiping, all waiting for the next act of the drama." I scoffed, took the will from her hands, and casually tossed it into the brazier. Serena and the bastard screamed and lunged toward the brazier, trying to retrieve the will, but was burned by the flames that ignited. Serena's expensive fur coat was instantly torn with a gaping hole. "Zara! How dare you burn the will?" Serena pointed at my nose and started yelling furiously, showing none of the usual gentle, rational, and independent demeanor of a strong woman. Since she returned to the country, over these past 10+ years in Lucian's company, she has consistently maintained this persona. "Because this will is invalid." I brushed off the dust on my clothes and said indifferently. "How could that be?" "This was the will Lucian personally had a lawyer draw up in the hospital room that day. You were there too." I sneered at the mother and son. "The will states that the properties under Lucian's name are to be inherited by his biological son and his mother, but there are no properties under his name at all." Serena turned pale, her eyes wide as she glared at me and screamed, "Wasn't it all your money that was spent on Lucian's medical treatments over the years?" "That was marital joint property," the lawyer standing beside me suddenly said. "Lucian didn't sign a prenuptial agreement before marriage, nor did he divide his assets with Zara during his lifetime." Serena staggered a step. Were it not for her son supporting her, she would nearly have fallen. "I am Lucian's son, and by law, I have the right to inherit his property." Serena gave her son a sharp pinch, and the child reluctantly shouted. The lawyer nodded. "Legally, that's possible, but first, you need to prove you are Lucian's son." Leo perked up at this and bragged, "No problem, prove it any time." But was pulled back by Serena, who covered her mouth. She seemed somewhat guilty and asked, "Now that Lucian is dead, how can we prove it?" "Very simple, a DNA comparison," I said with great interest, watching the mother and son pair. Serena looked flustered, while Leo was clearly out of the loop. "Leo has been calling Lucian dad for over a decade, how could it be fake?" Serena insisted stubbornly. People around were also saying things like the deceased should be respected and that conducting DNA tests now wouldn't be appropriate. I exchanged a glance with the lawyer, then nodded and said, "Lucian's inheritance can be given to this child." Serena and her son lit up with joy but quickly turned furious upon hearing my next words, like a Sichuan opera face-changing act. "But the child is still a minor, so the inheritance is held in a trust fund until they come of age. As for the child's support obligations over these years, they should still be fulfilled by his guardian." "Oh, I'm talking about you, Serena." Then, I pulled out a thick stack of bank transaction records, all the money Lucian had spent on Serena over the years. "The child was born during my marriage to Lucian, so you're the mistress. The money Lucian has spent on you over the years is our marital property, and I have every right to reclaim it. If you can't repay it within the deadline, I'll sue you directly." My series of moves left Serena completely stunned. All her earlier arrogance had vanished. I Serena stammered, unable to form a complete sentence. So Serena was actually the other woman? I always thought she was a single mom and felt sorry for her. The one who deserves pity is Mrs. Lucian. She stood by him through years of fighting cancer, and just when he finally recovered, Lucian was gone. Exactly. And now with this mistress and illegitimate child showing up, Mrs. Lucian is really having a streak of bad luck. Ugh, how dare the mistress and illegitimate child make a scene? Don't they know to respect the deceased? The hushed whispers around them seemed to weigh heavily on Serena and her son, almost bending their spines. Seeing the moment was right, I asked them to leave. Not only did Serena fail to get a single penny, but she was also vilified as a homewrecker. She hurriedly left with her child in tow. I turned to look at Lucian's portrait and murmured, "Lucian, turns out no one truly loved you in this lifetime either." Life without Lucian felt as if it could practically take off. I immediately hired a professional manager to handle the company for me. Traveling around the world with just a single suitcase. This was something I never dared to dream of during my student days. While I was basking in the sun on a small island in the Caribbean, the system that had been silent for a year suddenly reactivated. That same familiar, lazy electronic voice, still slightly distorted in my mind. "Long time no see, host." I lazily asked while lying on the beach, "Where have you been this year?" "I went for further training." "The system needs further training?" Before I could ask this question, it interrupted me first. "Host, there's a little accident with your current mission strategy now." The target suddenly awakened, learned about the mission, and was assigned a new task. I nodded. Now the target character has been revived, and his mission is to make you fall in love with him again. What the hell is this? How can the dead come back to life? I've already scattered their ashes. Can you guys in the system department be a bit more reliable? I was already enjoying life, and now you tell me he's revived? The system replied somewhat awkwardly, "Can't be helped. He offered too much. He traded his freedom in the next life for this walkthrough." I fell silent. Never expected Lucian to actually dare to play this game. If he fails the walkthrough, I won't get erased, right? I asked the system nervously. "That won't be the case," the system said calmly. "Our developer is a female engineer, and she only makes unfaithful men pay the price. Even if Lucian fails to complete the mission, only he will be eliminated." Hearing this, I breathed a sigh of relief. As long as it's not me who dies. "So, do I have to return to my home country now?" I asked reluctantly, gazing at the beach full of handsome guys with six-pack abs. "No need, because Lucian is already here." "Host, I wish you good luck." After finishing this sentence, the system vanished once again. No matter how I called out, it wouldn't respond. Immediately after, a voice I hadn't heard for a year echoed in my ear. "Zara." The familiar voice rang out. A figure blocked the sunlight in front of me. I looked up and saw Lucian. The him who had returned from rebirth showed no changes from before. He just looked at me with joy. "Zara, I finally see you again." Irritated, I put on my sunglasses and stood up to head back to the hotel. He grabbed me, pulling me tightly into his embrace. "I know everything now. My death was your choice. You had an ulterior motive in getting close to me." I struggled a few times, only to find his arms as unyielding as iron, impossible to break free from. I might as well give up and quietly lean into his embrace. "But I don't blame you, Zara. It was only after dying once that I realized who I truly love. I know you've always loved me, ever since our school days. This time, let me pursue you, okay?" Lucian's confession at this moment was utterly sincere. When I looked up at him, I saw his eyes were red and filled with tears. He looks utterly pitiful. But I'm no longer the Zara who could be easily deceived with a few sweet words all those years ago. Just seeing his face, I can't ignore all the years of deception he put me through. He even let another woman wear my pajamas and share intimate moments with him in my own bed. "Lucian," I suddenly laughed, 20 years couldn't make you see clearly, and now you think dying once will make you understand everything? Then you'll have to die a few more times. Who knows, maybe you'll be the next Einstein. Lucian was momentarily stunned by my words. In the past 20 years, I had never spoken to him like this. Most of the time, I had been gentle and understanding, always accommodating him. Now my words were full of barbs, and he definitely wasn't used to it. Zara, he frowned, I know you resent me. Give me a chance to win you back, okay? Not far away, a handsome mixed-race guy with blonde hair and blue eyes was walking towards me. He was my new boyfriend, named Kaysen. When I met Lucian, his eyes were filled with indifference, yet his entire focus was on me. Baby, you look so beautiful today. Shall we go back to the room later? I prepared a surprise for you. I broke free from Lucian's embrace and happily placed my hand in the handsome guy's palm. Lucian grabbed my other hand in panic, his eyes reddened as tears streamed down his face. He gritted his teeth and snarled at me fiercely, Zara, how dare you? I impatiently yanked my hand back, you're absolutely pathetic. Lucian didn't leave, instead trailing closely behind me the entire time. I was having a drink with Kaysen at the bar, and he was sitting in a booth not far away, staring at me without blinking. Kaysen accompanied me to dance, and he followed us onto the dance floor, standing beside me like a block of wood. After that, whether I was eating, swimming, or watching a movie, even when I went to the bathroom, he would stand outside the door waiting for me. It wasn't until I held Kaysen's hand and walked toward the hotel room that Lucian finally couldn't take it anymore. Zara, do you have to do this? He gripped my wrist and roared angrily, as if he had caught a cheating wife. I found it somewhat amusing as I looked at him. Lucian, what I do now has nothing to do with you, does it? I am your husband. Oh, but my current marital status is widowed, I replied calmly. Kaysen watched the two of us from the side and burst into laughter. Hey old man, you're trying to take advantage of a dead guy? Lucian seemed provoked by those words. He shouted directly, I didn't die. I came back to life. Zara, you can't do this to me. Kaysen looked at him as if he were a madman. His roaring attracted the hotel security. Several security guards worked together to escort him out. Early the next morning, I stretched and opened the door. Startled by the figure at the door. Lucian was sitting at my doorstep, arms crossed, dozing off. Hearing the sound of the door opening, he rubbed his eyes and looked up, then immediately stood when he saw me. Zara, are you still angry? Staggering toward me, he tried to pull me into another embrace. I dodged aside. I thought about it all night, you were with that guy yesterday just to make me angry on purpose. Are you still mad now? Suddenly, I felt this man was truly shameless. What kind of twisted logic led him to such a conclusion? Lucian, do you really think you're something special, huh? Rubbing my sore waist, I inadvertently revealed the hickey on my neck. Upon seeing this, Lucian's eyes darkened, filled with unbearable pain. Zara, once your anger subsides and you've had your fun, please come back to me, he pleaded humbly. Before I could speak, Kaysen emerged from my room. He wrapped his arms around me from behind, embracing my waist tightly. Did you enjoy last night, sis? I nodded contentedly with narrowed eyes. Do you think that line you just delivered was cool and heartfelt? I didn't look at Lucian. Whether it's looks, figure, or performance in bed, you can't compare to him. So what makes you think I'd come back to you? I pointed at the man behind me, who bit my finger playfully with a grin. Lucian was driven to complete madness by the scene. With bloodshot eyes, he pushed me aside and punched Kaysen in the face. I quickly pulled him away and shielded Kaysen with my body. Lucian, what's gotten into you? You can only be mine. You betrayed me. Lucian's eyes were filled with pain as he choked back a sob. I chuckled lightly, so what about you? Were you very loyal during those 20 years? Lucian suddenly fell silent. He was kicked out of the hotel again and even blacklisted. Heartbroken, I took Kaysen to the hospital. The entire way, he didn't ask me anything about Lucian, only saying he would wait until I was ready to tell him. Touched, I leaned against his chest. While paying at the hospital, I spotted a familiar figure at the counter. After scrutinizing for a long time, I finally confirmed that the person was Serena. A year after Lucian's death, I filed a lawsuit to reclaim the assets. Serena and the child vanished overnight. Half a year ago, someone told me they saw her abroad. Never expected to spot her on a small island in the Caribbean. Kaysen went to get the car, and I stood alone at the hospital entrance. A few rowdy kids on skateboards passed by and bumped into me. I was knocked to the ground. Before I could react, a pair of large hands lifted me up. "Zara, are you okay? Let's go to the hospital to get checked out." I resigned myself to my bad luck, rolled my eyes, and struggled free from his embrace. I was utterly disgusted by him. Now, even his touch made me nauseous. "Why do you have to meddle so much?" I asked with a frown. "Zara, your matters have never been trivial." He said the same words to me 20 years ago. Back then, we had just gotten together, busy every day with work and repaying debts. I had to rush to the emergency room at midnight due to acute appendicitis. Lucian hurried back from out of town. At that time, he held my hand heartbrokenly and uttered these words. Only after Serena returned to the country, the person who could make him so anxious was no longer me. I curved the corner of my lips and glanced at Serena not far away. Right now, these words would be more fitting if you told them to Serena. Lucian grew agitated, his voice involuntarily rising. "What does Serena have to do with this? The one I love is you, the one I've been married to for 20 years is you. Serena was just a mistake, believe me, I'll handle this mistake." I nodded with a smile. "All right then, why don't you repeat those words to her again?" After saying that, without waiting for their reactions, I turned around and got into Kaysen's car, driving off in a cloud of dust. After returning to the hotel, I had someone look into the reason why Serena came here. Only then did I realize she didn't have a single cent to her name and was staying here illegally, surviving by testing drugs for hospitals. As for that illegitimate child, there's no news now. I don't know how Lucian dealt with Serena. After that day at the hospital, I didn't see either of them for an entire week. During this week, apart from the yellow roses that appeared punctually at my door every day without fail, there were also countless pieces of jewelry. Today it's a luxurious seafood feast, tomorrow it's a complete set of high-end jewelry. Even Kaysen said that if he were a woman, he would be moved too. I scoff at such things. All the finest delicacies were shared with the staff, and even the most luxurious jewelry was sold off for charity. By the 8th day, I finally couldn't hold back and called the system out. "When will Lucian be exterminated?" The system yawned lazily and said, "His current situation is a bit tricky. It might take some more time to make him give up. Serena exposed the news that he's still alive and is now pestering him for money." Listening to the system's report, I frowned slightly. Kaysen leaned closer to me, greedily inhaling the scent of my body wash. "What's wrong? Ran into some trouble?" I looked at him apologetically. "You might have to endure being the other man for a while." I thought it was something serious. He laughed and held my hand. "As long as you love me, I wouldn't mind being the other man, or even the fourth or fifth one." I took the initiative to reach out to Lucian. When he saw me, his eyes lit up. The moment he spotted me, he eagerly tried to move closer. "Zara, you're finally no longer angry with me." I reached out and stopped him. "The outside world knows you faked your death, so our marriage is still valid. I called you here today to divorce you." Lucian seemed surprised. "Impossible. As long as I'm alive, don't even think about divorcing me. There's actually the simplest solution: give up the mission right now, get erased, and I won't have to go through the trouble." My words hurt him deeply. He lowered his eyes and bowed his head, pleading. "Are you really unwilling to give me another chance?" I didn't respond, standing up to leave. He also rose, trying to pester me. Then Serena interrupted. A year since our last meeting, she had long shed her former poise and refinement. The year-long drug trials had left her face swollen and her figure altered. Her disheveled hair was greasy, and her ill-fitting clothes were covered in stains. Accompanying Serena was that illegitimate child, Leo. Lucian, have you abandoned us, mother and child? Do you have any idea how we've been surviving all this time, just the two of us? Serena fell to her knees before him, clutching the child, and began to sob. That bitch Zara is demanding the property back and handed your inheritance over to the foundation. We didn't get a single penny. I had no choice but to flee the country with Leo. Lucian, you heartless bastard. Are you really going to abandon us now? Serena was crying intensely, not forgetting to pull her son into the tears with her. After a year apart, the child was no longer as reserved as he had been at the morning hall. Like his mother, he had turned into a madman. Dad, I've never been able to live with you since I was little. You always told me to wait, but Mom and I have waited all these years, and now you're begging for another woman's forgiveness. Zara is the other woman. The other woman. Lucian was getting a headache from the mother and son's commotion. At first, he still had some compassion for these two, but upon hearing the child call me the other woman, he suddenly flew into a rage. A slap landed on the child's face. Don't you dare spout nonsense. Your mother is the other woman, and you're just a bastard. The only reason you and your mother have lived unharmed till today is because of Zara's kindness. Leo was stunned by the slap, staring blankly at Lucian before stammering, my mom says the one who isn't loved is the homewrecker. Zara is the homewrecker. Smack. Another slap landed. Serena screamed and lunged at Lucian, clawing at him. Leo also joined in to help his mother, trying to hit him. I stood behind them with my arms crossed, watching the whole farce unfold. Today, besides meeting Lucian, I had also arranged to meet Serena. I told her Lucian was with me, and she immediately came over with the kids. Hidden in the potted plant behind me was a phone, live-streaming the entire scene just now. The fig leaf covering Lucian's first 20 years was torn away by me. The internet must be in a frenzy right now. Bystanders, unaware of what was happening, called the police. Officers arrived quickly and took us all to the station. When I came out of the police station, Lucian ignored Serena's pulling and cursing, sporting a face full of injuries, and dashed straight to me. Zara, you saw it today, I have absolutely nothing to do with Serena now. Can you forgive me? I stood by the roadside waiting for Kaysen and didn't even glance at him. Zara, what do I have to do for you to forgive me? If apologies worked, what would we need the police for? I asked him with a smile, though the warmth didn't reach my eyes. Everyone back home probably already knows what happened today. You'd better start thinking about how to divide the property. Lucian narrowed his eyes upon hearing my words, displeasure evident in his tone. You set me up? I replied impatiently, let's say I did. It's not like you haven't done your fair share of scheming against me over the years. I traveled across the country to find the best doctors for you, while you were busy cozying up with Serena. I single-handedly kept the company running for you, while you were out there romancing Serena under the moonlight. Lucian, you owe me all this. But it was Serena, that bitch, who seduced me, he roared. I've always loved you, Zara. I just realized it a little too late. Lucian, his voice choked with tears, held my hand and buried his face in my palm. I felt a dampness in my palm. It must have been his devout tears. Did Serena force you to cheat? Did I force you to have a child with someone else? Lucian, deep down, you're just a greedy and shameless scumbag with absolutely no sense of responsibility. Stop making excuses for yourself, you really disgust me now. Lucian slowly lifted his head, tears brimming at the corners of his eyes. His shoulders suddenly slumped. Let's get divorced as soon as possible, if you still have any conscience left. With that, I turned and got into Kaysen's car. The Caribbean has recently entered its rainy season. The island is often drenched by sudden downpours, leaving nothing untouched. I've been waiting for flights to resume during this time, spending my days cooped up in the hotel with Kaysen. It was right then that Lucian appeared outside my window. The pouring rain had drenched him from head to toe. He stood in the garden outside, staring blankly at my bedroom window. Leaning against the floor-to-ceiling window, Kaysen said with reluctant sympathy, "Shouldn't we let him in? If he keeps standing in this rain, I'm afraid he might fall seriously ill here." "That's perfect. I'll be a widow then, saved from going through a divorce." I was busy reviewing the company's financial report and didn't even look up. Early the next morning, the weather finally cleared. Lucian was still curled up outside my window. Kaysen stepped forward to check his temperature and then took him to the hospital. After that, we headed to the airport with our luggage and flew back to our home country. I saw Lucian again a week later. Serena and Leo returned with him. We had arranged to meet at the law office to sign the divorce papers. The moment Lucian saw me, his face was filled with anticipation and joy. "Zara, you must have been worried about me when you took me to the hospital that day, right? Have you forgiven me?" I looked at him mockingly. "It's a shame your imagination isn't being used to write some cliché wife-chasing drama." Serena followed closely behind Lucian, rolling her eyes at me as soon as she saw me. "Sign the divorce agreement now, and we'll go to the Civil Affairs Bureau as soon as the cooling-off period ends." I ignored her eye roll and walked straight into the meeting room. Since Lucian was at fault, he insisted on leaving the marriage with nothing. After signing the agreement, Serena immediately threw a tantrum at the law firm's entrance, shouting at Lucian for being heartless. I put on my sunglasses and turned to leave. Little did I expect Lucian to shout something at me from behind. "I will definitely win you back, Zara." I walked straight out of the law firm without looking back. What bad luck. After the divorce, Lucian simply wouldn't let go, chasing me from abroad back to our home country. He even held a press conference, admitting his infidelity in front of national reporters to apologize to me. Then he made a passionate confession, claiming the divorce was to build a better future with me. He even promised to prepare an extravagant wedding ceremony for me. Make up for the regrets of that year. I scoffed at such notions. Kaysen and I quietly got our marriage certificate. The day we announced our marriage happened to be the same day Lucian planned to livestream a marriage proposal to me. When he showed up at the hotel entrance with a diamond ring worth millions and a crowd of reporters to ambush me, Kaysen and I arrived holding our red marriage certificates. All of Lucian's efforts in recent days became a joke. Kaysen even openly mocked him in front of the media. "Old man, playing the prodigal son returning at this age? Where were you all this time?" Lucian knelt on one knee, staring blankly at the red booklet in my hand, the diamond ring slipping from his fingers to the ground. To all the media friends, my marriage with Lucian is already in the past. While he was still in shock, I seized the moment to announce my marital status directly in front of the cameras. "This is my current husband, Mr. Kaysen. I hope everyone can bless us." Kaysen and I were smiling happily as we gave interviews to the media. Lucian looked utterly dejected and slumped to the ground. "No, this can't be. Zara, you must be playing with me, you're still angry, right?" Like a madman, he grabbed me by the neck right in front of the cameras and screamed. Kaysen kicked him out with one foot, disdainfully saying, "Daring to touch my beloved, you're way out of your league." Just as Lucian got up and was about to charge forward, Serena suddenly appeared. Brandishing a dagger in her hand, she screamed and rushed at Lucian. "You heartless man! How dare you abandon me? I bore you a son. I've followed you without status for 20 years. With a thud, the dagger plunged into Lucian's abdomen. Blood gushed out instantly. The crowd let out a collective gasp. The reporters' cameras and microphones immediately turned toward Lucian and Serena. No one could have imagined that the media Lucian invited to witness his happy moment would end up reporting on his life hanging by a thread. Serena was quickly subdued by the police, and Lucian was taken to the hospital. Everything he had meticulously arranged turned into a joke. Lucian woke up 3 days later. As soon as he woke up, he demanded to see me. When my assistant told me about it, I was about to go on a honeymoon with Kaysen. Kaysen glanced at me, seeking my opinion. "There's nothing to see. Let him fend for himself." Kaysen waved for the assistant to leave. "Aren't you curious about how Lucian would react when he finds out about that bastard child?" The man's eyes sparkled with a sly, mischievous glint. Honestly, I wasn't the least bit interested in the matter. After all, whether Lucian is alive or dead no longer has anything to do with me. But since this little pup is so curious, I figured I might as well indulge his inquisitiveness. I followed him to the hospital. Lucian had become paralyzed due to cerebral hypoxia. He was sitting in a wheelchair, looking utterly dejected. When he saw me, there was still a glimmer of light in his eyes. "Sir, we're here this time on someone's request." I didn't speak, it was Kaysen who started the conversation. "Ms. Serena refuses to cooperate with the lawyer and only wants to see you. I understand your current physical condition doesn't permit it, so I'll convey Serena's request for you. She wants you to take good care of your son together." Lucian couldn't speak complete sentences now, only nodding. Then he gazed at me with deep affection. "By the way," Kaysen stepped in front of me, blocking his line of sight, "regarding your illegitimate child, here's a DNA comparison report from the police. We hope you'll review it. I believe you have the right to know about this matter." Lucian finished reading the forensic report while holding on to Kaysen's hand. Furious, he headbutted the papers away. His throat produced a hoarse huffing sound, unable to utter a single word for a long time. His eyes rolled back. Doctors performed emergency treatment on him. Before being wheeled into the operating room, fragments of his consciousness remained. Watching him being unceremoniously dumped onto the gurney, I burst into laughter. "Lucian, you're truly pathetic. Serena is completely and permanently imprisoned. That illegitimate child couldn't inherit Lucian's estate because he wasn't Lucian's offspring. Lucian also had no obligation to support him. The child was sent to an orphanage. Due to his bad temper, he faced constant bullying from other children at the orphanage. Finally, one day, unable to endure such isolation any longer, he sneaked out in the middle of the night to go find Lucian. On the way to the hospital, they were hit by a drunk driver speeding in a car. The person was thrown 100 meters and died on the spot despite immediate rescue efforts. After marrying Kaysen, we started traveling the world. It wasn't until 2 years later that I heard from Lucian again. The long-absent voice of the system echoed in my mind once more. "Host, long time no see. It's been so long since we last met, I almost miss this electronic sound." "It's been ages, did you go for training again?" "Of course not, I'd been with you in another way all along." The system abruptly shed its usual laziness. The system indicates that Lucian has abandoned the mission and will be eliminated. He requests to see the host one last time. I casually stretched, "Whether he's alive or dead has nothing to do with me anymore. Lucian's final will states that all his assets are to be left to you." I poured myself a glass of water and nodded. After all, when we divorced, he left with nothing, so there's barely any property in his name now. This will make no difference. I scanned the room and surprisingly didn't see Kaysen. He used to stick to my side like glue, but today I have no idea where he went off to. System, do you know where my husband went? For some reason, I found myself asking this question almost involuntarily. The system suddenly fell silent. No matter how much I called out, there was no response. Just as I was feeling puzzled, a familiar voice suddenly sounded from behind me. "Host, I'm here." I turned around and saw Kaysen's handsome face, smiling as he leaned against the doorway watching me. "Host, I forgot to tell you, the system you initially bound to is a lifetime one. From now on, I'll stay by your side, never to abandon you."